The tabar, agasnosa chaat, fruit chaat, dahi balle, golgappe, sabz chaat. पहली बारी आलम रॉक रोड ਤੋਂ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਗਣਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਜੂਸ ਜੀ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਗਣਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਜੂਸ ਵਸੀਮ ਦਾ ਢਾਬਾ outside Lord Pizza 32 Alum Rock Road
Ready when you are.
number
Just press
0784
Put that down. Put these up.
925 Wasim the Taba.
On tea? Make this a tea. Sure? Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. What about you? No, okay.
Specialist shows.
Yeah, we can start. Good evening and welcome to the Zoe Show. It's 8 o'clock, Wednesday the 17th of November. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Zohib Sadiq. This is the weekly community and well-being show where we discuss topics around community, well-being and anything related to that. So if you're tuning in on social media, on the website, however you're tuning in, welcome first of all. Please do say hello, let us know that you're here. So if you're watching this live on Facebook, let us know where you're from. Let us know that you are tuned in. And if you're listening via the website or the radio apps, the airwaves, you can phone in and ask questions on 0121 682 9735. So I've got a wonderful guest this evening who's going to be talking about the topic around health and wellness. Now, during the pandemic, we've had many lockdowns, we've had many occurrences where we've had to isolate ourselves, we've had to work in very restricted conditions, we've been faced with so many challenges, and there's been so many things around health and wellness that has come up in the last, I'd say, 18 months or more. But my guest tonight will touch on not just those topics, but other relatable topics as well. So good evening to my guest for the evening. We've got Mr. Zach Fairbanks.
Good evening, Zoe. Thank you.
How are we doing?
Me.
You okay?
Very good, very good.
Good. Well, thanks for coming along tonight. As I said, we will be having a very in-depth discussion around these topics around health and wellness. Just for our viewers and listeners, do you just want to tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Zach Fairbanks. I'm a mindfulness meditation teacher, and I'm co-founder with my partner Gosha of a company called Wellbeing in Your Office, and we kind of do what it says in the tin. We bring well-being to the workplace, and we bring mindfulness meditation, which is what I do, and Gosha does the yoga. She's a yoga teacher. And we also have a team of specialists that bring nutrition, first aid for mental health, financial well-being, digital well-being, things like that. And then we have an individual side to our business, which is well-being in your home, which is aimed at individuals who want to access some of the services that we do. Which we thought was really important because sometimes companies will put on sessions and that'll be it. And then somebody's like, well, can I get a bit more? And I'm like, yeah, you can. Yeah. You come to our other part of the business. So,
fantastic. It's brilliant. So what do you actually specialise in yourself as part of the business? What is your kind of key area?
So mine's mindfulness meditation. That's what I teach.
Yeah.
So I do introduction sessions, one-to-one sessions if necessary. We run courses for businesses and individuals. And that's what I do. Yeah. And within the courses, I incorporate yoga as well. So that's where Gosha would come in. She'd do some of the yoga part of it.
Right, okay. I think we're going to be using quite a few technical or jargony words tonight, if I can say that. So just for people who aren't familiar with this topic, what is mindfulness?
Good question. So it's probably a word that's been bandied about and people use this word, but what is actually mindfulness? Well, mindfulness is really a state of awareness. It's a state of awareness of the present moment. And it's a particular kind of awareness that we have. It's an observational awareness. And it's an awareness that we have with no judgment, with non-judgment, and with an open mind. And that's kind of the technical description of mindfulness, but it's kind of like, what does that mean? How do I become observational? Well, it's through practice. And the state of being mindful, we often in daily life don't practice. In fact, we practice quite the opposite, actually. And and we'll kind of touch on that when we're talking about autopilot. I mentioned before we started the show, we talked about autopilot. So mindfulness is this observational state that we try and get in, and you'll know about mindfulness because humans are innately mindful. But now in modern society, we kind of practice being mindless. We have too busy a mind, you see, we end up too critical thinking. But you'll know what mindfulness is. For example, if you've been on holiday and you've seen an incredible sunset and it's really captured your awareness and you've just been absolutely speechless perhaps from just seeing this wonderful setting, and then you may have been aware of that, aware of how beautiful something was, and that's a kind of state of being mindful. Or you've been perhaps through a very emotional traumatic event. You may have lost somebody, and at that point you were incredibly focused on that moment, and you knew that moment was very powerful. You're aware of what's going on, perhaps all the worries and the work and some of the issues that you had in your life at that point just kind of got pushed to one side, and you were focused on now. But what I teach is a way of coming into that state without the need of the serious situations that happen in life, or without the need of the holiday necessarily, is that we can practice getting into this state all the time. And what we find when we do that is that we're actually a lot more living in the moment, and therefore we're actually having more of our life. So that's quite a long answer, isn't it, to what is mindfulness, because it's such a broad subject.
Well, it is broad, and I do think I think there is so much more to this topic, and that is what we're going to be exploring. And we've actually had a few comments. So we've had Pfizer saying hi Zoe, hi Zach. So thank you, Pfizer, for tuning in. We've had Mohammed Ashfaq saying Assalamu alaikum, bye Zahev, listeners, and to your guest Zach as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. We have had a question come in as well, and do you want to take a question now? Or should we do it? Okay, let's go for it. We normally do have a section for Q&A and that sort of stuff, but actually, let's go right ahead and take our first question of the evening. So this is Pfizer with a question, and it says, how do you keep yourself mentally well when people around you are negatively affecting your mental health?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That's a deep question, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? So, through practicing mindfulness, what we can aim to do is know how we're feeling. So we practice being aware of ourselves. So through practice of meditation, which we'll do a meditation towards the end of the session, we end up practicing being aware of our feelings. And that's the key part of mindfulness, is suddenly we can take this awareness of we're having a thought. We're aware we're anxious. We're aware we're happy. We're aware we're joyful. But the subtle difference is that observational stance is noticing we're having thoughts. Now, if we feel that we're around negative people and we're starting to get attached to that negativity, mindfulness can help us in some respect by just observing and noticing that we may be getting some negative thought patterns that may be influenced by others, or maybe they're thought patterns that are just created by our own mind. This is what our minds do. So by practicing mindfulness, when we can start to get a bit of distance between those thoughts, we can then start to choose how to respond. We can then choose, or it will help us better not get tangled up in some of the negativity that happens. Right. And then we end up spiraling down, don't we? So mindfulness helps us to just keep that gap on there. And then what tends to happen if we practice this a lot is that we tend to notice even more, to some extent, how people are starting to affect us or how we're reacting to others. And we can either internally do something about that, not get tangled up, or sometimes it may mean I'm going to have to not see as much as this person, because I am finding that this is becoming quite negative for me. I had one client of mine who was a very anxious person, and she had a few sessions with me, and then she came one day, she goes, I have a friend that phones me a lot, and I find that she just drains me because she's constantly in need of reassurance, and she's quite negative. And now I'm finding myself choosing when I'll speak to her, not quite so often. And I'm like, this is good. You're still being a good friend because you're there when she needs you. but you're actually kind of putting your kind of breath mask on first. You know, the O2 mask that drops from airplanes. You put your O2 mask on first, don't you, before helping others? And that's an important part. If we want to really be a great friend to somebody who's perhaps in a negative spiral, then we need to look after ourselves first so we can be good for them.
Yeah.
So that may mean sometimes that, as in this case, my client, she just needed to just distance herself a little bit more than she was. And then she found that she could have a bit more energy. And then when she had that call, she could give a bit more and be perhaps a better friend, you might say, to that person. So I'd say practicing the meditation, practicing noticing the thoughts that you're having about the situation, and then see if you can manage some way of creating some distance physically, if you need to, with some of these people or those situations. Not always possible, I know, but if it is possible, then that's the way forward.
Okay. Well, I hope Pfizer, who asked the question, I hope that was helpful. As I said,
question.
Mindfulness. As I said, it is a topic that we were planning to talk about anyway, but and I'm sure there's more to it than what Zach just explained about. Now, what's a typical situation that you just explained mindfulness, like kind of like what it is and examples of how a client of yours went through it, and we got a question from Pfizer there, but. Is there? Do you think sometimes there's a element of that people aren't mindful of being mindful, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
It's a bit of an obscure way of putting it, but you think sometimes people because they maybe don't know what mindfulness is, then they're not aware of it at all,
that's
right. What's going
not
on.
necessarily if they're being mindful or not, and that's a really important part. So part of mindfulness practice, so for example on courses that I run, is that we teach people how the mind works, not to necessarily kind of some psychologist level, but to enough of a level to understand that how our thoughts are affecting our mood perhaps. So for example, so I'll give you a small exercise, right?
Let's go for it.
And the people listening in can go for this. So close your eyes.
Okay, so this is a live meditation exercise, by the way, guys. This is, if you're listening on the radio, if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, whatever it is, do get involved. So, as I said, like, Zach's going to do a little demonstration now. We're going to do an exercise. So let's go for it.
Yeah,
okay.
So this is just an exercise to demonstrate how your mind works and how and what can happen from it. So everyone wants to close their eyes.
Yeah.
And I want you to imagine that you're in a workplace. You're in your workplace, and you've had an argument with a colleague. Yeah, it's quite a bad argument. The argument finishes, and you walk outside the office, and you see another colleague, and they're going to lunch just as you are, or you're going to lunch, and you say to them, "Do you want to come with me?" And they say, "No, I'm too busy. I've got to go." What goes through your mind? You just had this argument with a colleague. You've asked another colleague if they want to go to lunch. What goes through your mind about the situation? About this refusal to want to come with you?
Yeah, it's like rejection, isn't it? Yeah.
I feel rejected, perhaps, or they know about the argument, perhaps. It's something to do with that. That's often what comes up. So let's change it again. You're in work again, and your boss rings you and says, "What a great job you did on this project." You're feeling wonderful because you've just been congratulated by your boss. You think, "Great, yeah, this is wonderful." And you walk outside and you see your colleague, and you're going for lunch. You say, "Hey, do you want to come for lunch?" They go, "No, I'm too busy." How do you feel in this situation?
I suppose I wouldn't be. Maybe, I don't think I'd be too bothered, if I'm honest with you, because I've just had that high of being appraised, by the manager. Yeah.
So bring your eyes open there. Okay, that's the exercise over.
Yeah.
So we've had the same end situation where we've gone out of the office, we've seen the colleague, and they're too busy, but two quite different mind responses based on our mood. So the first mood, we're a bit down because we've had an argument, and perhaps we're reading into the other colleague not wanting to go with us, we're feeling quite rejected and hurt and like that. The second one, we're feeling really good because we've been congratulated. Perhaps we're not bothered at all. They just go and they're busy and we believe them. So the point is, depending on our mood, that will influence our thoughts and the meaning we make out of situations. Now imagine that becomes greater and we start to think, oh, you know what, they don't like me. I don't think this person likes me anymore. I don't think people like me in this workplace. This happens, no? People think like this. And then suddenly you can spiral into a very, very negative spiral and start thinking negatively about your workplace and how you perform there. And then if something else was to happen, who knows what you might start to think. Your performance will go down, you'll feel stressed, you won't feel comfortable, and it can really go in a bad way. We can't always rely on our boss giving us great news, can we, to make us feel good? So what we must realise is that, given the two situations, is that we must be aware and notice the thoughts we're having. So when we're in that first situation and we say, hey, do you want to come for lunch? And they say no. And we notice that negative thought saying, oh, it's because they know about my argument. It's like, oh, I've just had a thought. I don't know that. Facts. Thoughts are not facts. And that's the takeaway really tonight. Is your thoughts are not facts. Yeah. They're just ideas from your mind. Because your mind will do this. This is what the mind does. It creates meaning. It's always giving you ideas, but it doesn't really care how you feel. Yeah. And in fact, how you feel will influence those thoughts, because it's trying to relate the thoughts and how you feel together to give you ideas on that. So we need to be really careful and aware that, oh, I'm having these thoughts, okay, I don't have any evidence for this, that it's just because I've had an argument, we'll just put it down to that, and we just walk ourselves through it. Yeah. We just walk ourselves, and by doing that, we, the self, begin to walk ourselves through the thoughts we're having. We begin to observe the thoughts. So, thoughts are not facts. We are not our thoughts.
There's always, I have to say this, on the show weekly, we always have one quote or one saying which I always want to highlight, and I think that was the one from tonight. So if you just want to repeat that again, Zach, for everybody, is what you just said.
Thoughts are not facts, we are not our thoughts.
Thoughts are not facts, we are not our thoughts. That is such a deep thing to say, and I do think that a lot of the time, we're always saying we're busy. We're always saying, people like, as you mentioned, busyness, stress, like overwhelm, which we're going to get more into actually as this, as we progress, during tonight's conversation. Do you think sometimes people use that as an excuse, like, oh, I'm too busy, and then they forget about like self-care? How important is that?
I mean, I think we often at work and in our lives wear it as a badge of honour. How you been? Oh, busy. Like it's a good thing. It's like, it's not good, busy. Well, can't you just, we need to be balanced. Yeah. That would be a good answer, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Balanced. I'm being a bit more balanced today. Yeah. Oh, great, good for you. Busy. Oh,
yeah. Okay. Why do you think people say that? Oh, I'm too busy. Do you think that's like a defence mechanism?
I think perhaps people genuinely are, but I think perhaps that we don't spend enough time slowing down. We don't spend enough time checking in. We don't spend enough time pausing. And we end up rushing through our lives, and that probably leads well onto autopilot, really, because we mentioned autopilot before the session started. And what we find really in our lives is that because we live fairly routine, most of us live fairly routine lives. So, for example, we get up in the morning. Yeah. So I'll ask you, Zach. So, can you tell me about your shower yesterday in any kind of detail? No shame if you can't. Most people won't.
No, it was a fairly. This is something that I never shared on the show before. No, it's fairly standard shower. Just rinsed the body off and dried myself as I usually do, and that's it really.
Okay, so that's what you did.
Yeah.
But how did it feel? What did you notice on your skin? How did the water feel on your skin?
I think very comforting, very soothing, warm, almost like just.
And what was the smell of the soap? Do you remember the smell of the soap you would have used?
I don't know. I think it was like shower gel, something that I used. I think shower gel or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is that most of us won't be able to recall much about the things that we do on a regular basis. They're on autopilot. We get up. We go and have a shower, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, we're going to have breakfast at some point, maybe we leave the house, We get in a car and we drive. How many of us have left the house and think, did I lock the door? I can't remember if I locked the door, or did I turn the iron off? We drive in a car, we've all done it, where we've driven a few miles and not remembered anything about what we've driven. That's because we're on autopilot.
So is that you talking like on a subconscious level, where we're so used to our routine that we don't think about these things?
That's right. So just like when we learn to drive a car, when you first learn to drive a car, it's not autopilot. It's very mechanical. You have to think about everything. It's not very good for driving a car or doing anything like that. So we part of the great thing about humans is that we have this autopilot mechanism in the brain, in the basal ganglia, which is a part of the brain. There's other parts involved. Yeah. But it means we could drive the car and not think about it.
Yeah.
But we also do that with a lot of our life, don't we? So we can have a shower and not think about it. And what we'll actually end up thinking about is something else. So often we do our to-do list, for example, if we're at work in the shower, or what am I going to do today while we're having that shower? But the trouble with doing that on a lot of the things that we do is we're practicing not being present for the thing we're doing. So I'm not saying that when you have your shower tomorrow that you're going to have a really amazing experience of having your shower. It's a shower in the end of the day. We've done it a million times. But the point is, if we can start to practice mindfulness, we can do it in the shower. We can do it having a cup of tea, having a biscuit, having our meal.
Yeah.
We practice bringing attention to the thing we're doing. And that way, that is practicing mindfulness, because then we're practicing being present for each thing we do. When we practice something, humans get good at it, whether it's good for us or bad for us. So if we practice not being mindful, i.e. we'll do something like having a shower and our mind wander onto something else, we'll get good at that.
Yeah.
So that plays out, for example, when you're with family and people find themselves who are really busy. I just don't feel present when I'm at home. My mind's wandering to work, and my mind's wandering to these worries. I just want to be here with my kids or my family, right? It's a common thing people say. And that's because they practiced not being present for the thing they're doing, and not being practiced being self-aware or checking in during their day on how they are. So these worries are built up, and et cetera, et cetera. So simple things that we can take away from tonight's session and people can implement in their lives immediately is when you have your shower tomorrow, get in the shower and really notice what the body sensations are from the water.
Yeah.
Just notice that. And then notice with the soap, what does that feel like in my hands? And then smell. What can I smell in this? What citrus fruits are there? Or what? Mine this morning had butterscotch in it. Oh, butterscotch. The cream's almost a bit sickly, actually. It's almost not very nice. Yeah. And then bring some attention. And it's not, again, people make the mistake, just wants me to really enjoy my showers. It's not about enjoyment. This is about flooding your conscious awareness, flooding your senses with stimulus. So therefore, you have full attention. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get full attention to what we're doing and practice it when we can. Yeah. So therefore, when I have my cup of tea, I'm really having my cup of tea. We had a quick one. We did some work with the RSVP, the Rape Sexual Violence Project. Yeah. And we did a meditation using a raisin, where we take 10 minutes to eat this innocuous piece of dried fruit. One lady didn't have any raisins, so I said, just get a biscuit. She said, I love biscuits. She said, okay, great. So she gets this biscuit. And she ate half the biscuit. And she said, it tasted like toast. It was amazing, she said. And she said, I would have had half a pack by now, but I don't want any more. I've just enjoyed this half a biscuit. So we're like, well, if anyone has a problem eating too many biscuits or think it's a problem, then make more of the biscuit. In fact, we said at the end, let's honour the biscuit and give it the time it should have, because we love it. We love the biscuit. So let's just take more time and take longer to eat it, and then your digestion starts to fill up a bit because you're not rushing. Yeah. You enjoy every single mouthful and you really make a moment of it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. And that helps us slow down, check in, notice how we're feeling, because we've stopped and done this one thing. And suddenly we're more self-aware of how we are. Yeah. And by constantly doing these things throughout the day, there's nothing extra to what you're doing. It's just bringing attention to the thing you're doing. Yeah. We will find ourselves more present and more relaxed.
Well, it's really powerful, isn't it? And it's almost like this idea of mind over matter, and the fact that like almost you're then in control of your thoughts, you're in control of your day, your activity, whatever you're doing.
Or at least aware. At least aware.
You're
of
more
your
aware
thoughts.
of it. Yeah,
So you can then
yeah.
choose how to respond.
Yeah.
So it's not, you're not necessarily, we're not going to control our thoughts. We will have those negative thoughts. We will have those judgmental thoughts. I think people get a lot of hang up on the judgments they come up in their minds about things. Humans will always judge.
Yeah.
It's in their nature. It's a survival mechanism to make quick decisions about people they see, because 100,000 years ago it could have meant life or death.
Yeah.
But what we are very capable of, which humans have developed very well, is the ability to notice our thoughts. And that's the bit we're trying to cultivate. So if we have a judgment, we notice it, and we know then either we respond to it or we don't respond to it. We have the choice. But it's knowing that. And then when we have people that are too reactive, that aren't emotionally stable, they're the types of people that will react from their judgments. So with mindfulness, we can really help our emotional regulation. Especially with young men. I mean, mindfulness is now being taught in schools, which is wonderful, because if it's for everyone, mindfulness obviously, but for young men especially, which we often cause the biggest problem in society, from violence and anger, is it will help them greatly to reduce that and choose response instead of reaction. So it goes a long way.
Well, it definitely does go a long way. And I'm just going to echo some of those thoughts here, because Pfizer, you've responded to your answer earlier, Zach, saying, thank you, Zach. That's really helpful. Yes, you are right. It's not always possible to distance yourself from these people. This is being emotionally intelligent towards ourselves. Mandy Hockheimer saying good evening. Good evening, Mandy. Thank you for tuning in. Mohammed Ashfaq saying hello to Zach and all listeners. I believe that's just a repeat of an earlier comment, but I'm glad you're still with us. But he did say fantastic show. Wonderful. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. So let's just move on a little bit in terms of, so you said we're not necessarily controlling our thoughts, it's more creating awareness. But you had a lovely story that you were sharing earlier, that you were involved in a project involving women in a mosque. So just for our kind of community, our local community of listeners, Asian community especially, how do you think, what was the impact of that, particularly on kind of Asian women, Muslim women? Just talk a little bit about that experience.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Gosha ran that session, and yoga, importantly, first of all, is very much a part of mindfulness, because what we're aiming to do with yoga is to get into the body, and the body is really the conduit, it's said, of our emotional state. So just from a very basic level, for example, when you need the toilet or you're hungry, you'll know the sensations in your body. And these are kind of the real basic alarm signals that we react to. But there's so much in the body that will tell us how we're feeling about a situation, how, we know when we're anxious, we'll feel it in our gut. We'll know when we're probably angry, we may feel it in our chest. And there's lots about the body that becomes very important to our sense of well-being. And that's how yoga helps. Yoga gets us into our body, focusing into our body, as well as some of the physical attributes. There's incredible mental attributes that yoga give us. So we were asked by a mosque in Birmingham, whose name escapes me, forgive me, to put a taster session on for some of the ladies at the mosque. And it had some really positive feedback. Some of the ladies had done yoga before, some of them hadn't. But gosh, it's great, she can adapt the class accordingly. But yeah, it's been received really well. So we're hoping to now go on to do a course of eight sessions for them, and then get them really involved. And then the men might be getting some mindfulness as well. So they might be organising a mindfulness session for those guys to do a course of 8 sessions. To do that as well. So
brilliant. It's great, the fact that also I often find men tend to shy away from these kind of topics, or they don't get involved as much, with mental health, and I think all of a sudden now it's become more prominent. It's been highlighted in the media, particularly, in recent months, recent years. What did you find kind of I know you're still involved in that project, and you're still doing it, but what's been the kind of what's been like the most noticeable kind of highlight so far of working with women and working sort of within a mosque? That sort of stuff.
I mean, this was online, so we did this online situation. It's difficult to say. I mean, Gosha would have to answer that one really, but I think it's Gosha gets as I do, a lot of pleasure out of seeing people having say something, oh, it's just what I needed, and I just managed to kind of get some distance from my day. And these are the things that you're making breakthroughs when people have actually managed to find some peace, and they've found some peace through yoga, through meditation. And I think these are the big wins for us. Is when I funnily enough, I did a session on mindfulness for a global lawyer firm, and one of them wrote in from the United States to their Wellbeing inbox and said, I've been suffering with depression, and this has really helped me. It doesn't get any better than that. That's it.
Because you've put an impact.
Absolutely. You've helped somebody.
You've helped somebody,
which is the session was worthwhile.
Which is brilliant, And
it's the same with Gosha and the yoga, she gets sort of great feedback from the ladies, and she loves that kind of spurs you on to do more. So.
Yeah. You mentioned the phrase distance from your day. And that kind of almost says to me that, we talk about this term being busy, and then I'm also then going to connect that to, you spoke about overwhelm. Now, we spoke about why people think they're busy or why people say they're busy. And then you also just mentioned, like, you get some testimonials that people say, like, this is just what I needed. Why do you think it takes so long for people to address that this is something that they might need, or that they need to do something?
We've never been taught it, have we? We've never been, the mind really has never been a part of health until recent times. And in the last few hundred years, it's always been about the body, because that's the tangible thing that early doctors could get into. But certainly, in Western culture, I think it's certainly in Eastern culture, where you have Buddhism, these guys, this is being on for several thousand years, mindfulness. But then, as a lot of things in history, that they go away and they come back, and things take more prominence in different cultures, don't they? But I think in modern society, it's a relatively new thing, and we again think being busy is a good way from distracting from the trials and tribulations of life. So a common phrase to say to someone who's just lost someone, for example, is keep yourself busy. Okay, maybe. But actually, maybe it would be better to sit with that grief. And maybe it would be better to allow the grief to come and perhaps not push away. And then it would not necessarily be so powerful and maybe not so painful. It's still going to be painful. It's a process we have to go to. Mindfulness doesn't take away thoughts and negative thoughts. In fact, if anything, we turn towards anxiety, we turn towards depression, we turn towards anger, we face it. And by doing that tends to soften it. That tends to soften around it. So I think, answering your question, I think people are culturally generally used to thinking that being busy is a good thing. And actually, we all need to slow down, pause, and take time. And realise that life's rushing ahead, and all these small moments, that shower, that cup of tea, they're really not small. They're really important, because you're there, and if you're not there, you haven't lived that bit of your life. And if your autopilot is most of your morning, well, that's a lot of morning. That's a lot part of your life, isn't it? And then you've got a bit of your day at work, bit at home, then you're asleep. So where are you going to be alive? Where are you actually going to be living your life? Because you need to kind of live every moment. And when you're in every moment, then life and distance between things like yesterday and today, the distance between that would feel huge, because you've lived every single moment. You've been present for every single moment. So I think being busy is a problem. And I think it really is just I think perhaps a cry out for people to say, look, I just need to slow down and be with what's going on.
Be with what's going on, being present, and you mentioned just then, we've covered things around kind of like wellness, mindfulness, being present, and then also, as I said, like kind of having that distance from your day. It's all kind of just, I always find like it's just very kind of like people say these things just for the sake of it. But let's say, well, actually, before we move on any further, so guys, if you've got any comments or questions regarding this, please do leave a comment on either on the Facebook page for RPOR's Radio Birmingham. It's also shared to my profile as well on Facebook if you're following me, and we're also live on various other platforms on our website, on the Radio Garden app, YouTube, Twitter. So do get your questions in. If anyone wants to phone in, you can be completely anonymous. You don't have to share your own shower story or anything. Or if you do want to, you don't have to say your name. But you can phone in via our studio number, which is 0121 682 9735. So we'd love to hear from you. So Zach, just for our listeners, what has been kind of like your experiences regarding, let's say, anything related to anxiety, depression, stress, overwhelm? What were your kind of like, I suppose, what was the connection between your own experiences and what you do now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've suffered all my life with anxiety, and I first had my first anxiety attack when I was 10. I'm 48 now, so it's going back, 49, sorry.
Yeah. Just to explain, what is an anxiety attack?
Well, I started to become really tight in my chest, and I started to hyperventilate. And then I felt very faint after hyperventilating. I was very panicky. So basically my sympathetic nervous system just kicked into overdrive, and in over the top fashion for the situation I was in. So that continued through my school years, and then reduced when I started practicing a Japanese martial art, Aikido.
Ah, right, okay.
Which I still practice today.
Yeah. How many years have you been doing that?
Off and on, pretty much 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I better not mess with you then.
Well, it's a non-competitive art,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we don't get in the ring or anything.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And it's but actually, what I had some of the most profound moments when I was 20 through the practice of Aikido, where I was incredibly present for my life, and then in the last few years of practicing yoga and Aikido and mindfulness, I realized that Aikido is purely an embodiment of mindfulness, because there are certain attitudes in mindfulness that we practice, and those attitudes are like non-striving, patience, trust, non-judgment, beginner's mind, and non-striving. And Aikido encompasses all this in the training in the dojo, you see. So mindfulness has been a part of my life unknowingly for 35 years, and then more recently through the practice of pure mindfulness, but it's actually focusing on the word, the study of mindfulness, I've come to realize how Aikido is completely integrated into that, you see. So, but I suffered with a lot of, mental ill health through my career. So at times when I wasn't practicing Aikido, were times when my mental health would deteriorate, and I burnt out at work. I had to have time off. I was put on medication. So I am very susceptible to overwhelm, and that's you mentioned the word a couple of times today, actually, overwhelm, and it is it's interesting. You've probably come across the word resilience.
Yes.
And I've always keeps hearing this word, thinking, what is it? What is resilience? People get using this word, are you resilient?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Well,
and again, technical, jargony, sounds big and complicated, but let's this is it.
I researched this. I did some study on what resilience was, and it's like, right. So here's an easy example about resilience and overwhelm. So imagine you've got your life, and it's made up of work, chores, family, friends, going to restaurants, bars if you do, going to the cinema, hobbies. It's kind of all the bits to your life, right? Some of them you enjoy, some of them are depleting, let's say, of energy, and some of them are nourishing of energy. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens when people get overwhelmed is it comes from probably a stressor in their life. Mm-hmm. So it could be a work stress, family stress, maybe someone's ill, or it could be a child. It could be all three of those that are going on. And then what we do is we tend to focus in on that. And all those other things that we could say are nourishing us, giving us energy, making us feel good, like going to the cinema, meeting mates, having that phone call with a family, having a nice meal, all those things that give us that positive feel, we now start to think is optional, because we need to focus in on the thing that's stressing us. Because we think if we're focusing on the stressing us, then it won't be a stress anymore. But it's actually the reverse, because everything that was giving us that energy, that positivity, that centeredness, that distance from our stress, we've got rid of. So we're only now doing the thing that's stressing us. It might be that sick relative, it might be our parenting, and it might be that work stressor. So guess what? We then start to go into this sequence of overwhelm where we start to be having a low mood. Our sleep patterns are interrupted. We're not sleeping very well. We're becoming a bit joyless, perhaps, and we're becoming in a very low mood, and eventually we can't really do much. We can't even get out of bed. That's how bad it can become. Now, resilience is essentially all the nourishing stuff that we were doing. We were building resilience. We were building that positive energy. If we've had a hard week at work, and then we've had a great weekend with friends and family, it's been great, and we've created that distance, and we feel wonderful. Suddenly Monday morning doesn't feel quite so bad. Suddenly the week we've had doesn't feel quite so stressful, because we're re-energized, aren't we? But if we were to carry on working, thinking, oh, I'll get this done because I must get this done, it's a stressor, then by Monday, we're in a really bad place. And we're actually not being productive. We're no longer effective. So resilience, to build resilience, is really about nourishing yourself with the things that you know you enjoy. And realizing that when you do have major stresses in your life, that we come back to that analogy of putting your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
If you've got a loved one in the hospital, my mother sadly passed away 3.5 years ago, and she was ill for a year. And Gosha had to tell me, you've got to get to yoga, because I was working and I was just seeing my mum, seeing my mum. And then I started to become really tense, and then I wasn't being as effective at work, and then I wasn't being great and effective with mum or at home with Gosha and my daughter. So she literally kicked me out of the house, said, get to yoga. And I realised, yes, this is important. It felt selfish. And I think that's a problem. I think we feel selfish when we do things to nourish ourselves. But actually, we must try and get over that and think to ourselves, I'll be a better person for the stressor, my family, if I actually nourish myself. If I am good, if I am feeling good, I can give more. But if I'm empty, I've got nothing to give, and I'll be cranky, and then I'm just becoming another problem. So she did me the world of good, and it absolutely worked. I went into yoga after not doing it for a few months because of mum, and managed to kind of keep up one session a week, where normally I'd be doing 4 or 5, you see. So I kept up one session a week, and then that got me through these really stressful times with having an ill parent. So I think that's a really important understanding about how we can get sucked into overwhelm, because we think it's the most important thing, and it is important. But we must look after ourselves and nourish ourselves, so we can even be better at doing the important thing.
So focusing in on the problem, definitely does help, as you've just said. And one thing I did want to sort of finish with, and it's something that I've had a few people approach me over the last week saying, like, will you be talking about work-life balance? Will you be talking about working at home, and how do we deal with that and stuff like that? Which says to me that this has almost become, if I could say this has become an issue, because with COVID-19, with the pandemic, with lockdown, with restrictions, all these different things, it seems to me like working at home actually hasn't been what it's cracked up to be, and people have found it maybe more stressful than they were when they were going to the office. They had that space from their family, from their loved ones, from their environment, and all of a sudden now we find ourselves confined in working at home. We're combining work, home, and everything with it. So one thing I want to say to yourself is, have you? Well, let's start with with that question. How have you sort of like dealt with that with people? Have people come up to you and said, "Oh, like I'm working at home now all of a sudden, and I just can't take it," or what has that been like?
It's a really good point, because as a good friend of mine, Arif Khan, and he works at a major bank in Birmingham city centre, and he said to me, the problem working at home is guilt. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I'm I'm a spouse, I'm a parent, I'm an employee, and if my child's playing up or needs a nappy changing, and my wife's doing that, and then I have to go into a Zoom meeting, but she's struggling, now I'm pulled between. Or who am I going to let down? And that doesn't happen in the office. I'm just doing work in the office. She knows that she has to take care of it on her own. So we're receiving an Amazon delivery. The light bulb's gone out. We've got to be everything at home. And being able to kind of structure your household in such a way that you can just do work and not take care of the other things that are going on in your household is a real challenge. And so therefore we end up letting somebody down and feeling bad about that, which is a negative. We're feeling negative about ourselves because we're not fulfilling what we think we should be fulfilling in our house and in our job. So I don't necessarily have very easy answers for this, but I think from the first step, it's about understanding that is an issue and realizing it is. And that's a good first step, thinking, yeah, I'm being kind of pulled between here. And then maybe it's about trying to have conversations with your partner and understanding the role of what's going on with the children, and really good communication. So the meeting I'm going into at 10 o'clock, whether you're a man or woman, me, I'm going at 10 o'clock, I have to be there. I have to be there. Is there anything you need from me just because I've got a few minutes left? No, great, okay, we'll crack on. And I think having a separate room, if you can, that's away from everything else that's going on in the household. So it's these kind of simple, common sense, practical things where I've seen a lot of people, for example, on the dining room table, because it feels nice. Oh, I know what's going on. My wife's there, or my husband's there, and the kids are around. It's nice, but actually, you're not being very productive. And then you're not being a great dad because they want your attention, and you're not necessarily being a great spouse because she doesn't know what you're doing, or he doesn't know what you're doing. So it's like, try and be as kind of separated as you can, and then come and have a break, play with children if they're at home, speak to your husband or your wife when you're there, have that cup of tea or just a small glass of water when you've got a few minutes, and then go back to work. So it's kind of trying to separate it a little bit, trying to create some boundaries between what you're doing is a good way to start planning it, to then not feel that guilt or that pull between, which then makes us feel quite overwhelmed with emotion. And again, we stop checking in, we start to be too busy with our emotions, there's too much going on. And then suddenly we start to feel tired and fatigued from that.
Makes me, when you talk about kind of like having that distance or trying to create distance, getting your own space, it reminds me of for those watching as well, of a famous video on YouTube where I think he's an American politician who he's on a Zoom, he's being interviewed by the BBC, and then his children come in,
that's it,
and they run in, and then he's there, he stops, and it went absolutely viral, like 50 million views, and all of a sudden they became the internet sensations. But on a serious note, I suppose, especially during what I found was during the lockdowns, especially and even now, I think it's still a present thing. What it kind of highlights is that all of a sudden, because I know people who they were working in an office, now they've been almost forced or they've been encouraged to work at home. And I suppose people probably do miss that. It's difficult. It's weird, isn't it? Because you think, oh, I'd love to work at home, but then when you do, you then think, this isn't as cushy as I thought. And
I think that's where the balance is important, especially with employers, because we're social creatures, and when we're in, say, if we work for a firm, that's our tribe, and we want to be with our tribe. We don't want to be on Zoom all the time. So if you're a business that's asked people to work at home, or you end up working home, then you've got to bring your team together to have some social interaction. And if it is you're having a social, then let it be that. So I think the balance, because you'll find that the parents who have got children at home will probably want to go to the office, and then you may have single people that are happy to stay at home, but then those guys are getting lonely because they're like, oh, geez, I just need to talk to someone. I know when I first started working at home in my previous role, and I'd been seeing clients all day, and I then went to working at home and only seeing clients, say, once every 2 or 3 weeks. I ended up having a massive chat with the cashier in the local supermarket because I just needed to talk.
Yeah,
you know?
amazing.
I just needed to connect. You know, so I think it's always this word. It comes down to balance, doesn't it? And I think we have to be aware. Of which I'm pretty poor at this actually. And again, Gosha kicks me out of the house because I have a habit. I know myself, and I have a habit of I can just carry on working, and it's really important that we get out into the fresh air during the day. We go for a walk, and we keep that balance. And so, and I put it in my diary now. So I put it in. I set alarms for meditating throughout the day, just doing 3-minute meditations. I set alarms to go for a walk to remind myself because I have to manage myself because I have a habit of just carrying on. So that's what we can do. There's some of the tricks we can use to help ourselves. Is set a timer and go for a walk. And when you're on your walk, be on your walk. When your mind starts to wander to work and start thinking, oh, what a great opportunity to think about work, come back and use the senses. So we talked about the shower. Sight, smell, hearing, feel and taste. So when you go for your walk, what can you see? Your head suddenly comes up, which is great. You'll make yourself feel down if you do this. So your head comes up and you start looking around. What can I see? What do I notice? All these flowers, all the trees falling, especially now we've still got a bit of autumn left. We've got so many different colours. Notice this. And then, okay, that's part of the walk. Then what do I smell? What do I notice? What can I notice? Maybe there's some, I don't know, could be a bad smell, could be a good smell. What do I feel on my skin? Maybe the wind, maybe the cold, you know. And this is how to be on a walk. And then that will help us not mind wander over to work or that sick relative or whatever we're going to do. It helps us be present for the walk. So if you walk a dog, great, get out there, be on the walk. And that's practicing mindfulness. That's being mindful of your walk. And especially when it's something we enjoy, it's like, let's bring more enjoyment to it, more focus to it. And that will just help us be much more present and create some distance from our anxieties and what's causing us anxieties. And then we're more refreshed, more productive, if that's all right.
You make everything sound so easy, you know what I mean, Zach? It's
all practice.
And what's interesting is that it might sound like an easy premise and, you know, focus on your walk, you know, focus on the thing that's stressing you. A lot of the things you said today, I think a lot of people listening, and even myself, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I can do all of that.
It's simple.
It's simple, but it might sound simple, but then it's also like, are we doing it? And I think a lot of the time the answer is no, because
this is it. So this is where little and often. So if only tomorrow you focus in on your shower or something that if you go for a walk, then great, use the walk. But just remember, I'm going to be in my walk. I'm going to use my senses. And set an alarm if you need to. You know, really help yourself do something. And if that's have a cup of tea, and you want to say, okay, I'm going to just sit here, smell my tea, and smell the loveliness of my tea, have a biscuit with it, however you want to do it, but make a moment of it. You know, have your moment, because that's really important. Because that's all we've got in life. It's only moments. And the more moments we have, the longer our life, and so to speak, because we've got more moments in our life. So it becomes a philosophical statement, but it's also a tangible, practical statement. Is just get into the moment, you know, and suddenly when you do it more often, you'll just find yourself in it, going, oh, I'm really present. Wow, here it is. You know, here's that feeling. I haven't had to do anything about it because you practice doing it.
Wonderful. Honestly, it's so much value shared tonight. I think it's been absolutely wonderful. So Zach, if people want to, let's say, we've not had any more questions since, guys. So if anyone has any comments, if anyone wants to still phone in, we've still got a couple of minutes left. So if you want to phone on the studio number with any questions, 0121 682 9735. If anyone has any final comments or thoughts, please do get them in on the Facebook page. People saying fantastic show, wonderful, great guest, so many things shared. You know, I'll be applying these things practically. Just really positive comments so far. And on the note of positivity, Zach, if people are interested in anything you've said or they want to reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
They can reach us through our website. So individuals, we have our website, www.wellbeinginyourhome.com, and they can email us through that. And we have some online yoga classes as well as some online mindfulness classes and courses. We have a mindfulness course starting January the 10th. It's an 8-week course. It's evidence-based, so it's got loads of clinical research behind it. Incredibly powerful transformational course. Has a little bit of yoga in it as well. As I said, it's really important. So if anyone's interested in knowing more on that, again, wellbeinginyourhome.com. Give us a shout, and happy to talk mindfulness or anything else, really.
Fantastic, and mindfulness and many other topics which Zach is a firm expert in. I will be tagging and putting links in descriptions. So if you follow me on social media, if you follow the company page, all the links will be in there. I'll make sure I tag Zach and any other links, any other relevant links, so you can connect with him. Zach, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us on the Zoe Show tonight. And as I said, I wish you all the success in your business and any projects that you're working on. So thank you for coming on. Guys, so you've tuned into the Zoe Show tonight. Thank you for tuning in. I'll endeavour to get back to any comments that you've left and tag Zach in any questions that anyone put in the comments. So next week we have Kasim Majid. He will be our guest on the 24th of November, and he'll be talking all about digital currency and the importance of that. So the promos for that will go out later this week and next week. But I'm going to say a goodbye from me and Zach as well, and hopefully we'll see you next week at 8 p.m. on the Zoe Show. Thank you very much. There you go. We're all done, and then we just end that.